And it listened to me. It walked out of the thicket. It turned around and looked at me.
They looked up, and in this tree, there was a monkey man. And the monkey man jumped down out of the tree and started running away.
And suddenly they're right in front of the car. He slams on the brakes and manages to stop. And he's skidding because it's like quite, gravelly. And literally for about a second and a half, they just stood there because they don't know where to go. And you can tell they're panicking. They're like really nothing. And their face is like twitching.
Welcome back to Bigfoot Society, a podcast where we focus on cryptids, the strange, and the unexplained of this world. If you've got a story or something weird to share, send an email over to me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. And if you'd like to support this show, head on over to patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. And now, on with the show. All right, Bigfoot Society, I've got the privilege of chatting with Mr. Travis Roy tonight. We're going to talk about giants. Travis is the gentleman that runs the Giants of Ancient America page on Instagram. You may have heard him on some other podcasts as well. One that comes to mind is Blurry Creatures. But Travis, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking, and it's good to be on your show.
Awesome. I'm glad to have you here. This is one of the first episodes where we're kind of going into the unknown, into the mysteries of the world. And I told listeners that this is coming up. We're not going to be talking just about cryptids so much anymore. And this is our first foray into that. So let's talk about giants, Travis. So I want to hear first, how is it that you got involved with this giant thing? It sounds like your Instagram account is crazy. Like all the newspaper articles, like you are the man when it comes to like historical giant knowledge. How'd that start out, man?
Oh, okay. Well, it started out, I wasn't really looking into giants. I was looking into I was doing some historical research on the Celtic people, and long story short, I found out that my grandfather was Celtic, and so I started I've heard of that, but I didn't know what it was. So I looked into it, found out that there are people that kind of originated around the Caucasus Mountains, right north of modern day Israel. That was the land of Assyria back in the day. And so as I was studying these people groups, I began to notice that, they had these massive standing stones, and you're probably aware of that, all through Western Europe and in the British Isles. France has a lot of really massive stones.
Are we talking about like Stonehenge type stuff?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I was kind of baffled by that. And as I started looking into that more, I came across accounts of giants among them. And I wasn't ready to find that. I wasn't looking for that. And so I ended up buying a book from Fritz Zimmerman, and found out that he had been studying giants in the U.S. And after that, I was like, I really want to do my own research to verify if these news articles are true. And so I started doing that, and I started an account just as a place to display them so others could see it. So everything on my site are articles that I have actually myself researched just by going to public domain websites like Chronicling America or the Library of Congress or any other websites where they have like documented newspapers. So these are all just newspapers, and you have to do word search. So it's a lot of work to find these, but it's quite fun though, because you never know what you're going to find. So, yeah. So that's kind of just the short version of how it got started. Basically, these Celtic peoples weren't all giants, but there seemed to be giants among them as they traveled westward, and then from the British Isles, they even went to America, and there are thousands buried in America. I'm sure not all of them have been unearthed, and of course that's not being done anymore today. Most of them were unearthed between the mid 1800s to about the mid 1900s, and then it all kind of stopped after that.
So, and this is a pretty new topic to me, and I'm guessing the listeners as well too. So the first question I have for you right off the bat is, I'm going to my local cemetery. I'm not seeing plots where it's like, 10, 12 foot long, 18 feet, whatever. So you said that they were digging up these guys. Like, where were they finding all these giants at?
Okay, so a lot of them are buried in burial mounds. So these peoples had a tradition of erecting a massive mound of earth. And so they would see those, and then, of course, in America, they would do the same thing. They would dig into these because I don't know why they were digging into them. Probably like thrill seekers, treasure hunter type guys. And when they would find stuff, then they would notify a museum or someone like that, and then they would come and grab the bones or any type of artifact that was discovered there. But yeah, I mean, I have right here in front of me, I have a newspaper that I found. It's a report from 1897, and this is about discoveries in Europe. So we're kind of moving out of the land of Israel, like where a lot of the giants originated.
Sure.
And they started to move out. Of course, some of them went east. I found a handful of reports in Japan. Oh, wow. As they went eastward towards that direction. But a lot of them went west and over into America from Europe. But here's the report. It's just a real short one. It's titled Giants Remains. The bones of tombs of more than 200 giants have been found in various parts of Europe. So that's all it said. So it's kind of interesting, just like, here's a side note along with all these other reports. So that's a lot of giants. And a lot of these giants were like in Gaul, which is modern day France. Oh, wow. And then they moved into Ireland. I have a report here from 1914, and it is labeled here as a man who stood 10 feet high, skeleton of a prehistoric Irish giant. Laborers digging foundations for cottages in County Louth unearthed 3 skeletons, apparently of prehistoric folk, one of whom must have stood about 10 feet high. The skull of the skeleton was entire and measured 18 inches from the crown to the chin, and the leg bones and teeth bones were abnormally large. The skeletons were in separate graves. So, like in this case, I'm not sure if there was a mound, but they were unearthed while guys were building a foundation, it sounds like.
That is, wow. There's a ton to unpack there. So it really sounds like these guys we're all over the world.
Yeah, they really were. I mean, I have reports from Mexico, Canada. I have a report of a skeleton or a skull of a giant that was discovered in Peru. So yeah, they really were all over the place. But they did a lot of similar things as one another. So they might not have known, like each civilization have known each other, obviously, because of ancient times. But they did a lot of similar things. Like they have megalithic cities or burial mounds was a custom that they used a lot. So that's the thing that kind of seems to connect them to each other, is their traditions.
So we're saying that, I know throughout America there's all these giant burial mounds, and I know there's a pretty big one in Ohio, right? I know there's I've actually seen some in northeast Iowa. We traveled up there. So you're saying in most of these mounds there could be giant bones?
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, a lot of them. Yep. Yeah, it's pretty fascinating.
Oh, wow. And it used to be okay to dig into those back in the 1800s?
Yeah. I mean, back then,
Wild West.
There weren't a whole lot of rules back then.
That's true.
Not really sure the year, but there was some sort of a Native American Repatriate Act or something like that, where basically, and it's probably wasn't a bad thing, because in a way I'm glad that people did discover these, because now we can look at the history.
Right.
But I also agree that it's probably not a good thing just to go digging into burial mounds. So when
True.
they had this new act that passed, it protects the native lands.
Okay.
And so you can no longer just go digging legally into burial mounds. So it's good, I think. So
right, that is a good thing. We want to respect the history for sure.
Correct. Yeah, respect is what we should be all about.
You mentioned that there would be museums that would show up, and they would take are they taking the bones? What's the story there? Where are these guys disappear into?
Okay, so a lot of them would sometimes it would just be like their local museum. Some of them would be like the Carnegie Museum. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the Smithsonian Institute was mentioned, but it's rarely do I ever find a follow-up story. So it's hard to find those. It's usually just that report, and sometimes it's hard to find those, right? So, like I've gone back to find a report I found before, and I couldn't find it again. So it's kind of, once I get it, I like to put it on the page, or print it off just so I have it as a hard copy too. But yeah, that's where they would go. A lot of times, I mean, I found one where the sheriff had it. He had one of the skull. Yeah, he put the skull cap in his office.
Oh my goodness!
So there's got to be fragments here and there. Still, they've got to be around somewhere, somebody's special box or something like that.
But, someone's going to find something at an estate sale or a yard sale or something.
Right. A lot, sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but a lot of times though, too, these bones were so old when they were dug up. So when contact was made with with air, they would crumble.
Really?
So sometimes you couldn't really, you couldn't really save it. You could measure out on the ground, like where the skeleton was, but you couldn't really retain, like the bones wouldn't be retained in a preservable state. But that's not all the time. I think that has a lot to do with how much moisture was in the ground.
Okay.
A lot of stuff like that. Sometimes they would crumble. Sometimes they're, more or less not petrified, but fossilized. And other times they were just perfect. So
now, so we can't go to the Smithsonian today, and we can't be like, oh, let's go to the giant hall or the giant exhibit, right?
Wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it would be cool, but it also is kind of odd too, because they're somewhat human. And so like, it would be weird to go to a open cemetery today and just see, regular sized humans, bones laying everywhere. But they are, they're not just fully human. They're different. They're more of a oddity. So I could see how that would be pretty cool, to see, But yeah, you would think that they would have something on display, because obviously, whenever these guys or these road graders, road workers, or sometimes I found accounts where they actually were the Smithsonian out there, digging into a burial mound, and it said
Really?
what they dug up. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So they were really interested in this stuff, and I wouldn't see why they wouldn't have them on display sometimes. Back in the day, I really would like to find an account. It's probably not going to be a newspaper account. It'd be kind of cool if I could find like maybe an old magazine of theirs or something that would be talking about this, if they ever did. I'm not sure if they ever talked about it publicly. It's just the newspaper that would like mention they came out and gathered up the remains or whatever from the burial site.
So do you think there's some like Smithsonian warehouse somewhere where it's like all these giant bones, or they just like totally trashed them, or like what do you think the end game was there with all that?
I'm not sure if they would have trashed them, because I mean, if they spent the time and resources to travel west to go pick these things up, I mean, if it were me, I mean, if you didn't want to talk about it, I almost feel like you just have them in boxes somewhere, with the date, the location, and all that. But who knows? I don't know anything about that. I'm just thinking out loud.
Yeah, man, that is absolutely wild. Have you found? I'm sure you found historical reports over the years where like you're the guy that's rediscovered the article. You've got to have found stuff like that.
Oh, like them finding them and storing them somewhere,
or like a lot of cryptid researchers will find monsters or cryptids where like the cryptid would have been forgotten to history unless they were the one that found the article in their research. Do you think you've discovered stories like that, or?
I'm sure I have. I'm sure I haven't. And that's why on these things, when I find them, I tag the town or I tag the state.
Oh, okay.
Because I want to rediscover something for somebody's area. Because a lot of these, they're not necessarily my area. I mean, I found a few in Texas. They were here. But like if it's Nebraska, I make sure I tag that. Because I'm hoping somebody in Nebraska sees it and like, and I will get messages here and there from people, or people will message me and say, "Hey, have you found anything in this area?" And so if I haven't, I'll do my best to try to find something, and then I'll send it to them. So yeah, I'm sure I have uncovered some stuff, because there was there was some curse by an Indian tribe, Native American tribe. I can't remember the state, but it's called the Curse of Yellow Hair, where they went out, the Shawnee Indians basically massacred the last of these giant yellow-haired mound builders. So they're the mound builders, but they were almost like a Caucasian-looking people with yellow hair, and that was their chief. His name was Yellow Hair.
Oh, wow.
Well, as they killed him off, Yellow Hair threw a curse at him. So that's kind of how the story goes. But, I did find a follow-up of that story where they were damming up this river. And so Yellow Hair said, as long as this river, the waterfall makes the sound it's making, y'all will be forever cursed.
Okay.
So, and I don't know if they really were cursed. The story said so. But I did find a follow-up of this story not too long ago, is where they were doing some sort of construction where they dammed up the river for a time. And so the waterfall stopped making its noise, right? Okay. And so they actually went out and did this, I don't know if you call it spiritual rite or some sort of a ceremony to try to end the curse of Yellow Hair.
Oh, wow.
The giant mound builder. So, I mean, I do find interesting stuff, and I try to share it out there.
You mentioned that incident with Native Americans. I think I remember reading, wasn't there like an incident with like a Lovelock Cave is that in Nevada, or
yeah,
where there's some giants involved? Is that anything you're aware of, the story behind that, or?
I know a little bit about it. basically how that went is they were red-haired giants, and they were living in the Lovelock Cave there in Nevada, but they were supposedly cannibalistic,
Oh,
and
wow.
they were really a problem for the native Paiute Indians there. And so the story goes that they wouldn't stop being cannibalistic. So the Paiutes kind of, when they went into the giants went into the cave, they burned them. They just started a fire in front of the mouth of the cave. And so basically it sounded like it suffocated them to death.
Sure.
Years later, I don't know who went in there. Oh, they were digging out bat dung or guano.
Mhm.
And then that's when they discovered all these remains. Now it's kind of hard to find pictures of this stuff, but supposedly they were pretty big guys buried in there. And one the Indian lady who wrote the book, I think it's called Life Among the Paiutes. I think her last name is Winnemucca or something like that.
Mhm.
I don't know if I butchered that, but one of her, I think it was her grandfather, still had some of the red hair of the giant on one of his,
Oh, wow.
something that he had.
That's wild.
Yeah. So yeah, they were around. There were a lot of them around, and that's not the first time I've come across red hair. They weren't giants that I came across. At one time, I came across a couple mummies or mummified people that were like buried in an earthquake around the same area as that, and they were two children, but it said they had red hair, and so they could have been, some of the descendants or the children of giants.
They were like mummies, like you would find in Egypt.
Yeah.
Really?
Well, they were kind of mummified. They still had
Okay.
hair on it because maybe the desert kind of mummified them.
Sure. Oh, okay. Gotcha.
You know what I mean? Like it was
Yeah.
a perfect climate, so their hair was still there,
Yeah.
but there must have been some sort of a catastrophe in the area that maybe killed off some of these things too.
That is wild. So you're looking at all these articles. It seems like a lot of them are from like late 1800s, early 1900s, right?
Yeah.
So obviously we're not reading articles about giants being found today. Like, did you find that there's a period in time where like the articles suddenly stop for some reason, or like there's got to be a transition period there, right?
Yeah. I don't seem to find many past 1930.
Weird.
The odd time that I will, but it's kind of right around there that I find them.
Do you think there's a reason for that, or like did everyone just got really concerned with the world wars, or like?
Yeah. I'm thinking, let's see, I did find an article the other day. Let me see this was dated March 16th, 1934. And this is an article about the Smithsonian Institute. And I thought it was strange. They're not really reporting on any giants being found. They're actually reporting on being fed up with people discovering giants.
Oh, really?
So that may be the answer to your question. It says the Smithsonian Institution is fed up on skeletons of prehistoric human giants. And the doctor, the last name is not even pronounceable. The curator of anthropology makes no bones about it. So basically, the Smithsonian is fed up regarding the reports of prehistoric giants being unearthed. And that's 1934. But see, they didn't have control over the people digging these things up. See, a lot of times it was a construction worker. Lots of times it was somebody digging out for their basement. I mean, these things were all over the place. And they probably got tired of people digging into burial mounds too. And so that right there kind of states one reason why we don't see it after much after the 1930s.
It's very, very interesting. But do you think people are still finding stuff today? We're just not hearing about it.
They could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, who knows if they were digging something on their own land or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many of them up north, like the Ohio Valley area, Kentucky, Indiana has a ton. They were all over the place. These guys were building forts. Like there's like Fort Ancient up in the north, massive walls. I really want to go visit a lot of these places. I've been reading up on it, and it sounds amazing. So there's so much history here, and that's another reason I do this. I'm not really trying to rewrite history, but I'm trying to put context into our history, like the true history. I mean, like the history of the Aztecs. Who knows? What was it like? It would be kind of cool to see what it was like when they were building these big pyramids down there, and like in the Maya pyramids. Like who built them and what was it like? There's so many Indian or native traditions of like giants being destroyed from fire from above and all this stuff.
Oh, wow.
Down there. And I uncovered an account from Mexico. This is from the Evening Star, 1925. Skeletons of giants are found in Mexico. One of the most interesting of recent discoveries in Mexico is that reported by prospecting miners. So there's some miners working in some caves here in the district of the state of Chihuahua, according to one of the engineers who has reached Mexico City from the Sierra Madre range of mountains where the operations are being carried on. There have been discovered several human skeletons measuring from 10 to 12 feet in length. They were all found in one cave, being quite intact. The average length of the feet was from 18 to 20 inches. An anthropological department of the Mexican government is planning to send a commission to investigate the discoveries. The investigation is expected to clear up the origin of the wonderful Indians of the state of Chihuahua. The skeletons were all found in the sitting posture, shoulders bent forward and some resting on upraised knees. So they're kind of sitting, it sounds like with their knees drawn up, but in length, they were 10 to 12 feet high or tall if you were to stretch them out. And their feet were 18 inches to 20 inches long.
Wow.
So that's Mexico. And so you hear the stories of the natives saying, well, there was a race of giants that was here before they built a lot of this stuff. And then they say, well, there was a race that was destroyed by fire from above. Who knows what that means? Are they comets falling? Sometimes they have these mound builders and giants fighting each other off, having battles amongst each other.
Oh, wow.
You would have to, you have to assume that probably happened. Or imagine that it probably happened. You have these different giants over here and they're getting a fight. So they probably did.
Oh,
fight.
yeah. If you've got like huge creatures, human giants, like they're totally going to have a fight. Like, it's going to happen, dude.
It's going to happen. It's going to be a epic battle.
Oh, yeah. Man, that would be crazy. When I was doing a little bit of research for this, how do you feel like the quote from Abraham Lincoln is real?
I do.
That's just wild.
Did he actually say it? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
I've heard it so many times, not from his mouth.
True.
You know what I mean? So, did he say it? I don't know. I think he did. I came across it the other day as I was researching. So that was kind of cool to come across it myself, because I'd heard it, right? I heard, well, Abraham Lincoln said this, but of course I hadn't seen it myself.
Mm-hmm.
But I did come across it in a newspaper. So for what it's worth, he did he seemed to have said something about him. So
Yeah, about the giants in Niagara.
Yeah, yeah, and I thought I had it in front of me, but I have so many papers in front of me right now. It's not even funny. I try to have a lot of these accounts ready to read, but like when I do that, I have so many. But yeah,
it would be tough.
I have it somewhere I have it. So.
Have you ever had a person? I'm sure you have some wild DMs on that account. You probably have some wild DMs. Have you ever had anyone be like, "Hey, listen, bud, I've got a giant skull that I dug up in my backyard"?
Surprisingly, I haven't had anybody say that yet.
Really? Oh,
That's
wow.
a great question. That's a great question, though. Yeah, it's probably going to happen now. Now that you mention it, somebody's going to come out and ask me that or tell me that.
I hope it does. Oh, that would be so crazy.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, it would be. Oh, here. Hey, I've got it right here.
Oh, you got it. All right, cool.
A little excerpt from Abraham
cool.
Lincoln. It's a pretty long speech, but I won't bore everybody with all, his kind of rambles on about the Niagara Falls. But I'll just kind of jump in here at the key point. So in discussing Niagara Falls, Lincoln states, but still there is more. It calls up the indefinite past, when Columbus first sought this continent, when Christ suffered on the cross, when Moses led Israel through the Red Sea, nay, even when Adam first became from the hand of his maker, then as now, Niagara was roaring here. The eyes of that species of extinct giants whose bones fill the mounds of America have gazed on Niagara as ours do now. Contemporary with the first race of men and older than the first man, Niagara is strong and fresh today as 10,000 years ago. So it's kind of like,
wow,
like a power punch of his speech. And I mean, obviously he was up there, visiting the falls when he made that, I believe.
There's a lot you can take away from that.
Yeah.
You can take away, he talks about them being extinct or almost like a separate race.
Right.
That's wild, man. Is there any, I guess that's a discussion in itself. So like,
yeah,
were the giants just really tall humans, or were they something completely different?
Well, that's a good question. A lot of they did have. Sometimes they were wearing armor.
Really?
Yeah, copper armor in the States. Not all the time, but I did find one that was like I feel like he was around 8 feet tall. So he wasn't huge, but you have to remember when they're 8 feet tall, their shoulders were about 4 feet wide. So it's like a sheet of plywood,
Okay.
but thicker.
Wow.
Thicker than 3/4. But so these were big dudes, but they also had hieroglyphic writing sometimes in their mounds. So they did have language. They were like men. They made things with copper, so they're very intelligent. They used mica, which I think is some sort of a thin slate type material I think from the north. I don't really have much of it down here in Texas. Slates, writing tablets they would have, big stone battle axes, sometimes copper battle axes. So they were men, but their bone structure was so much bigger and thicker than ours. A lot of times their skulls would be mentioned to be 1 inch to 1.5 inches thick.
Oh, wow.
So it'd be kind of hard to go into a battle with these things, with these beings. It'd be hard to win against one.
It almost feels like if stuff like this gets brought up in our current culture, there's almost like you're going to get mocked for it, or you know what I mean? Does it feel like sometimes you're going to get made? I don't know. It's weird. It's almost like there's this
Oh yeah.
there's a narrative where it's like, oh, you talk about this, you're crazy, or like, what are you talking about? Like,
Right.
does it? I don't know. I get like this weird vibe sometimes. I don't
Oh,
know.
for sure. Yeah, it's. I wouldn't say it's much different. It's probably not much different than talking about Sasquatch or something like that. If you talk about giants, people look at you like you have four heads,
Yeah.
and so you almost don't want to talk about it out in public with people because they're looking at you like, "What? You're weird." Like, I mean, I've even had a preacher tell me, he's like, "Isn't there something better to study than giants?" So, I mean, even a preacher went at me, and I mean, giants is biblical.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm gonna say, because it's like, that's really weird that a preacher would be like that. It doesn't make sense, because it's like, if you have any knowledge about the Old Testament, I mean, dude, it's in there,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, there were some big ones there.
that's wild.
Yeah.
Do you think there's maybe some sort of like, do you think there's maybe some sort of like narrative to like shut down all the giant stuff? I don't know. It feels like there's something trying to be hidden, but maybe that's just like a conspiracy thing.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, it's not that far in the past, really. These articles,
That's
but
true.
it is, right? So like the mid 1900s, it's a little ways back there. And if it's just got suppressed for just a little bit, like, okay, 1930s, the Smithsonian's like, you know what? We're getting tired of going to get all these things. We're just tired of it. Then you have, you have like Darwinism coming in saying, everything started from small and came all the way up to about 6 foot tall. Well, if you're going to push that in schools, well, all this stuff, kind of shoots that out of the water. It's like, well, you've got to rewrite Darwinism because that doesn't fit. Because you've got these guys over here in Mexico that were 12 feet tall. Well, that's kind of going, well, you need to redraw that to where it goes to where they go up to 12 feet. And these are prehistoric people a lot of times. So what do you do with that? So there seems to be maybe couple different reasons why there might have been pushback. But if you push back for a little bit of time, you're going to have another generation who doesn't really know anything about it.
That's true. That is really true. You don't have to push back for too long.
Yeah.
All it takes is probably just a few generations, and then people forget about it.
Right. Yeah.
Unless some guy starts digging up all the articles and puts them on Instagram.
Yep, I guess so. Yeah, I just like blasting it out there. Very few people are seeing it probably, but it's fun to, and I have a Facebook account too with the same name.
Mm-hmm.
So I just put it out on both. Just spread it out there and I hope people get it and share it, because it's just cool. I mean, people are doing their stuff every day, going, grabbing coffee, going to work, all day, coming back, doing the same thing the next day. It's just kind of neat to throw something out there that like people don't think of on a regular basis. And it's true history. And it's not anything that we learned in school, and even in college, they're not teaching it. So it's like, well, what happened here? Because this is real history that we haven't been taught. So I don't know.
Exactly.
Here's what I think. These were groups of people, and I feel like their story needs to be told. Why suppress their story? Right?
Exactly.
Everybody has a
exactly.
history, and they have a story, and everybody's proud of it. But why suppress theirs? I mean, they lived a life. So why should we shut them down? That's kind of how I think of it.
What is so important about our culture that you're trying to save, that you're willing to bulldoze over a past culture and totally try to wipe it from existence? I mean, it feels like there's something there, dude. It's weird. That's some weird stuff, man. But
yeah, it is. And who knows who knows really the reasons why. Maybe we don't want to know all the reasons why.
That's true.
They do what they do, but
Were you saying earlier that I think you mentioned like megalithic structures. So were you saying that, well, obviously we know that there are structures around the world that are huge. Are you saying that is a potential that the giants were involved with those structures as well?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you can look at let's just focus on Ireland. Ireland's covered with these huge stones.
Sure.
And okay, they don't look real big, but I've moved a lot of stone in my life because I like working with rocks, building rock walls around, where I live and stuff. And a stone that weighs 300 pounds doesn't look that big. I mean, it's probably about 15 inches tall, 20 inches. These are massive stones. So who's moving these things? And then I uncover articles where, here's a 10-foot giant in Ireland, buried right here. Here's a group of giants that were buried down in France, down in this cavern where they were like trying to mine out some sort of iron ore, but they were using like stone tools, but they were trying to get out the iron ore and copper and stuff or whatever. So you have a land in a region where megaliths are, and some of these things are a couple stories tall. In France, there's a massive one. And you're like, well, like if you go to National Geographic, they're going to draw you a picture of regular sized people with a massive dirt hill. And
right, yeah.
How do they pull it up? But then in the same region where you have all these megalithic cities, even down in Peru, megalithic, huge wall cities. And then you have giants buried in the same region. So you just, it doesn't,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
You just know that they did it. And then you have the legends of the natives saying that these people built these cities.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, I have like here, Celtic, like there's Celtic writers who state that the Celts wandered westward, erecting the massive megalithic stones. But see, not all Celts are giants. I mean, you have Celtic people today.
Yeah.
But giants were among them, as hundreds of unearthed skeletons confirm this fact. So they say that they moved that way, and they were almost like a pathway they set, like they left a trail of megalithic markers, way markers as they went. But you also, in all these burials and instances where people are uncovering them out of like mines and stuff like that, with like stone tools still in their hands, that just kind of proves that they are the builders of these megalithic cities. That boggles historians' minds today, because they're trying to fit, our size people into a puzzle of like who did this.
Right.
So it doesn't fit. That piece doesn't fit. So
that is so crazy.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned that they were using, of course, they would be using bigger tools. Have there been reports that you found where like people have found like huge axes or huge implements, stuff like that are just like way too big for the normal person to use?
Yeah. Oh yeah, of course. I mean, even some of my hikes where I hike around, I've found a pretty decent sized stone axe head.
You found it yourself?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, just in a riverbed. But it was, I mean, I feel like it's about 15 inches long. So it's a lot bigger than what I would wield. And I'm a little bit over 6 foot. So I'm not going to grab one that size. It's too heavy. So if you're going to use it as a tool or a weapon, you need it to feel good with your arm. You can go to Missouri, and I believe the owner of Bass Pro Shops has a really big museum called, hopefully I don't butcher it, it's a Native American Museum, I believe, or a Museum of Native History.
Right.
If you go down in the basement there, he has hundreds of stone axe heads on display.
Really?
All sizes. But there are so many of them that are huge, 7 inches, 10 inches long, and they're tall. So, I mean, I would probably use one that's about maybe I don't know, 5 inches,
Right.
you know. 'Cause, I mean, you don't want to have to use it with 2 hands
Yeah, exactly.
or 3 hands, but you don't
Yeah.
have 2 hands. So it's like, but I even when I was there visiting, I mentioned to one of the museum guys about what I did. And I was like, man, I'm looking at all these massive stone tools. And he's like, yeah, but he didn't want to talk about it really.
Yeah, you could tell like he wanted to say something, but he's like,
he kind of agreed, but he didn't really. It's like, man, I don't know if we're supposed to be talking about this.
oh,
You know?
wow, really?
He wasn't like the owner.
Yeah.
It was like he probably didn't want to get himself into trouble, so he just
No,
kind of
definitely
nodded his head. I mean,
Wow.
the stone tools there speak for themselves.
Mm.
Some people say, well, that's just ceremonial. No, it's not. No.
Why?
I mean,
What's the
if you're a
point?
giant, why would you make so many ceremonial tools?
Yeah, what's the point?
I mean, there were accounts that I pulled up where there were stone axe heads with these giants. So you can actually go witness them at that museum. Yeah.
So they were like buried. The stone axes were buried with the giants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
Sometimes you would have metal. You would have like metal type weapons.
Ooh.
But most of the time it's stone. Of course, I mean, you have to think they'd be much like us. Like, well, they're not very smart if they're using stone. Well, if you drop me off in the middle of somewhere, I'm going to use what I have as a resource.
Mm-hmm.
There's no metal there.
Yep.
I'm probably not going to start digging a hole to go try to get some iron ore.
Right.
Smelt it. I'm probably going to use a stone first. And so you have to go at history that way. You know, so many people go at it backwards, like, oh, well, they weren't smart. You know, well, I don't think that has anything to do with anything, really. It's just like they're using what they have as a resource.
You mentioned at one point that there were hieroglyphics found around. Like, were those on like on tablets or how were?
Yeah, tablets. Sometimes like pieces of clay vessels.
Okay.
Like, that's my recollection. And they were kind of up in the north, but they would always say anytime an article would read that, it would say it was unknown hieroglyphics. So it wouldn't necessarily say Egyptian but it was some sort of writing.
Yeah.
Maybe it was. Maybe it was Egyptian. But there have been people who have just focused just on that subject of ancient, I think it's America BC or something like that. It's a book by Barry Fell.
Okay.
It's a good book to get because you can look at, he just looks at America and there's so many different ancient languages that were discovered in America. You have Celtic language discovered here. You have Viking language here. I believe they call it Celtiberian. So it's like Iberian / Celtic.
Oh, wow.
So it's like the mix of cultures was found in America. So you have many cultures. You have the Phoenician language discovered here, ancient Hebrew discovered. And some of the stuff's found in the burial mound. So then you have to ask yourself, well, who were all these mound builders? They might have been different groups of people. And also have the thought too, some of them, you have different size giants. Some of them are only around 7 foot, 7.5, but then sometimes you'd have ones that are 14 feet. They could have been just different tribes of just more mixed blood to where the bloodlines are getting, the heights and sizes are getting smaller. But then sometimes the 7 foot ones might be young warriors. So who knows? He might have been 15 and he was at 7 foot already. So because these were discovered so long ago, I don't even know if they had the ability to tell how old the bone structure was or the human was when they died.
Yeah, so that's a really good point, because the question is not, it's not just who are the giants buried in the mounds. It's who were the guys that were burying the giants in the mounds.
Yeah.
And that is a whole different spin on it, man. Like, that's wild.
Yeah. Yeah. These guys here, they definitely had communities. So, and I don't know, like the ones buried in the big mounds, like maybe they were kings and queens, because sometimes you find women
Sure.
buried, and they're the ones that are women are from 7 to 8 feet tall. The ones that I found. But yeah, so they had a community of peoples. So maybe it was like maybe giants were burying giants. Who knows? But they
Man, that's some
had
crazy stuff.
community. They had the knowledge of a lot of their mounds and temple mounds. They had temple worship mounds too. And they all kind of like the points of the mound will, face north, south, east, west, or they'll face some sort of a summer solstice or winter solstice, or, different, falling stars or whatnot in the seasons. So they had some sort of a knowledge that, we don't necessarily have, for such an ancient time.
So you're saying that there have been temples found as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, I remember, I can't remember the name of the book. It's an old book where it actually talks about like Lexington, Kentucky being built on a huge temple site. I don't know if you've ever seen. Yeah, man, I can't remember that. It's an old book, dude. It's wild.
Yeah.
The guy on TikTok was talking about it.
I need to get my hands on that. It sounds like.
Yep. It would blow your mind, dude. And it's all online too. Like how like there was that Google project where like everyone was scanning old books and putting them into Google library or whatever. It's one of those. Yeah. Okay. So I'll see if I can track it down and send it to you after this. But
yeah, definitely do that. Yeah. I don't. Like yeah. I believe it. Because Kentucky has a lot of history like that. Mound builders.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They were all there. So I don't doubt it. And that's a sad thing too. Like when the colonials were coming in, they headed west, they would do all kinds of stuff. Sometimes they would use the dirt from these mounds to use it to build something.
Oh man.
So it's like they didn't always have the right mindset.
Right.
So that's sad. Like that case, building it on top of something. It's like, whoa, that's okay. That's not a good way to preserve it. Yeah,
unfortunately, I think at that point in history, they definitely didn't have that mindset. They were not thinking about preserve. And this is me just kind of spouting off, but they were probably thinking more about like, how can I build a cabin real quick and survive the winter? But it is what it is,
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
And, you can see it in all, like, that's probably one reason all these articles are here is because they didn't really have the mindset of preservation. They had exploration and survival, like you're saying. So but thus you have these articles. So it's like, well, you kind of thank them for being that way for just a time anyway, because now you have all these resources of information that we can look at now and reimagine our history as it really is, that we haven't been taught. So you kind of love them and hate them for doing that, right? Digging into the mounds.
There was, I don't think I've asked this particularly yet. So is there any, and this is a question that's really big to ask, do you know of any museums around the world where they're actually like giant bones on display, or it's no?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay.
I have heard of some, but I can't recall which one it was, and I don't believe it was even in the country. There was a museum down in Peru.
Yep.
That years ago, I came across an article that said there were a couple 8-foot giants there, but I'm not even sure if they're there anymore. Because as Westerners Westerners started going down there because, you can't research up here. So they were there. and it's almost like a westernized area because of that.
Oh, wow.
So these museums, I don't know why they would pull them if they did pull those two. Maybe because of publicity.
Yeah.
And who knows if there's some sort of suppression from the Western cultures, then if it's the West is giving a lot of attention to elsewhere in the world, it might explain why, they may not be on display anymore.
Gotcha. Yeah. In your articles that you've read, do you ever find mention of like elongated skulls, or is that something completely different? That's like totally different than the giants, but you know what I'm talking about, right?
Right.
Yeah.
No, I do. And a lot of times I don't use the word elongated.
Okay.
But they give a description which is elongated. So they'll say these particular giant discovered or giants, they would say they look ape-like is what they would say. And they look like ape men. They didn't have a forehead, they said. So like right above the eye socket, it would immediately slope back. So that gives the exact definition of elongation of a skull.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't have a forehead like we do. It just right above the eye socket, it starts to slope back. They would say things like low intelligence. These guys seem to, not all articles, but like one article in particular said they look like ape men. They seem to have low intelligence because they didn't have a forehead. I'm like, what does that have to do with it?
Right.
How does that mean it's low intelligence? But yeah, I mean, U.S., Mexico, many times natural elongated skulls were found.
Were there other features that they were saying like that's really weird that they would use the term ape men? That's just because of the skull?
Yeah, because they look different.
Oh, wow.
They didn't necessarily have a forehead all the time.
Okay.
So they're like, well, that looks like an ape. So they call them ape men, or they look like ape men. Of course, they were big too, like they were giants. So they're like, well, this isn't a normal man. We'll just call them ape men.
Gotcha. So nothing like the arms were really long, nothing like that.
You know what? That's a good one.
Yeah.
I don't recall anything about arm length.
Okay.
Nope, I don't have any recollection of coming across an article that's kind of focused in on that. That's a good question.
Cool. Man, there's been a lot to think about so far, man. That you could really get into this stuff deep. Something I want to make sure that we talk about though, because this came up right before we started our chat, recorded, is we were talking about Bigfoot a little bit.
Right.
And you said you have some thought, because we do talk about cryptids on this podcast as well. So you say that you've had some run-ins over the years? Yeah,
I have.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, my first run-in was not a sighting, but it was a growl. I got growled at 2 times in one incident, and I was in Virginia, hiking up in the mountains. So a friend of mine and myself were hiking up this. It's like an old logging road that wasn't being used anymore. But these loggers would come in and cut a road. And so it's been like that for years. Like nobody was using it. So we were using the logging road and we were hiking up this mountain range where nobody lives back there. And as we're hiking up, I was following my buddy. The higher we got, I started feeling uneasy. And I noticed got very quiet. So we're hiking up and the road turned in a direction he didn't want to go. And so he just stepped off of the logging trail and we walked a few feet in the different direction off of the trail, the human trail. And we stood there for a second and then something growled at us like immediately, maybe 30 feet in front of us.
Oh, wow.
But there was like some tall laurel like bushes there.
Yeah.
that we could. It was August, so we couldn't see. It wasn't the fall or winter time. So it growled, and this thing was so deep. I mean, I can't even describe. It's like 20 men with deep voices, all like that.
Really?
Yeah, it just kind of like, whoa. And we just froze.
Okay.
We didn't do anything. We just, it made us freeze. And then it growled again. And that, you could almost tell what the growl was saying. Like, it was like saying, get out of here.
Wow.
Like, why are you still standing here? And so I followed him. He didn't go back to the logging trail, go down. He walked straight down the mountain, like all through this thick stuff. And he started picking up rocks because he wasn't packing a gun. I didn't have one with me either. But I was like, hey man, wait up on me, wait up for me, because he was leaving me in the dark.
Right.
So I would go back to that place, throughout the years and hike the same region. I would get wood knocks all the time.
Really?
I would go out. Yeah, I went out and I sat. Let's see. What I did is I took my metal detector. I had permission to metal detect up in there, just to look for old, Civil War bullets or whatnot, because it's Virginia.
Sure.
There's a lot of old history. And I was metal detecting, and I heard there was a shed nearby, and I heard something hit the shed, like a rock or something. And then I just kept beeping around. And then I heard this big boulder drop up on top of the mountain. And that was near where we got growled out like the year before. So I was like, oh, nobody lives up there. And what was that boulder? It was like somebody took a massive boulder and dropped it. And so I went up there and I just sat down. There was like this stone mound, like a stone burial mound. Wow. And I just sat there at the foot of the mound and just looking around. And then I started hearing like wood tapping to my left and then to my right.
Really?
I was like, oh, wow. Yeah. And so I got brave and I just started walking towards one of the sounds. And then between me and where my vehicle was, there was something banged. It was over a ridge, but something banged a tree like a baseball bat 3 times. Boom, boom, boom. And so from then on, I had all kinds of experiences there. But from, a light in the woods at night, not a lot of, no vocalizations, but just like banging and a tree shaking, just stuff like that. Weird stuff.
That's all in the same area. That's cool. And you said you were seeing like spook lights or something like that?
I saw one once at night.
Okay.
Yeah. Just a red light.
Really?
Nobody's out there though. It's like just in the woods. So it definitely something going on there. I did research after the growl. I was like, that couldn't have been a bear. It's too big. And then I found out black bears don't really growl. They just huff, make noises. They don't growl. So I was like, well, it's not a bear. So, and then later I was in Texas because I live in Texas, but I was driving at night down just kind of like a country road. And I saw a figure dart across the road, like a humanoid figure.
Whoa. Dart
across the road. And these roads, they're wide enough for maybe 2 cars, maybe a little more.
Mm-hmm.
So this figure darts across the road in 1 second, but its head was almost at the tree line. So it's like it looked like around 10 to 11 feet in height, but it passed in front of and the weird thing was, so there was an oncoming car coming towards me. And so it silhouetted this creature. So it's not, I wasn't seeing something, right? Like lights were coming. There was a car quite a ways away, but it was shining at me. And I have the habit of looking at cars' headlights because I don't want them to be drunk. So I'm watching the headlight a little bit because you can't tell at night. But this figure ran from my right to the left in 1 second. It crossed the whole road.
Whoa.
It had a slight backward bend to it. So later in the daytime, I went and looked at that area, and there was like a really tall pipe fence and just a field. But it must have just stepped over or jumped over the fence.
Yeah.
Because of its high rate of speed. And so I haven't been growled at in Virginia, and then back in Texas, I had this sighting. It kind of got me kind of curious about that stuff too. I'm already researching giants. So it was just kind of
exactly. Texas is a really weird state when it comes to Bigfoot. There's some parts of it where, and I don't know what region your part was in, but like, I mean, Eastern Texas, crazy for Bigfoot. If you look into like the Jefferson area, dude, it gets wild. But I mean, yeah, check out Lyle Blackburn's new Texas Bigfoot book. It's a great resource.
Really?
It's all the areas of Texas too. You should check it out.
I will.
Did you the Virginia one? That's really interesting to me. Did you ever look up BFRO and see if there are reports in the same area?
No, that's a good idea. I did not.
You should do it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's really interesting. It was really eye-opening for me because I'd never experienced anything like that before.
Wow.
I mean, it was scary at first. I've heard them, like, I would go out a lot after that. And I don't know, it's very intriguing to me. And so I would go into the woods and just by myself and just listen. And I would hear I would hear one kind of walking, like bipedal sound. I couldn't see it because it was in the summertime. But you could hear it crunch. And then I would hear him almost crawling, like a crawling
in
sound.
Virginia.
Yeah. Like an army crawl. So it's like, it's kind of creepy, but they didn't never hurt me. So I figured if they wanted to hurt me, they definitely would have done that.
Well, it's weird that you would mention that because there's many reports of Bigfoot actually being seen doing like a spider crawl.
Yeah.
Which is super weird.
Wow.
But I've talked to people personally and I've also read reports, but dude, they do some weird stuff, man.
I don't know if I'd want to see that.
The weird stuff. And then it was like, I went looking for Bigfoot in Iowa with my bud once, Tate, and like I captured some weird audio at 3:45 in the morning, and it was like of something unzipping my tent, dude.
Oh,
yeah. So
that's close.
That's a thing too. Like then there's multiple reports of Bigfoot messing with tent zippers or messing with tents with people inside. And like, so that's a thing you got to watch too. I don't know if you ever go out camping in that Virginia area.
No, not a lot, but I did go camping last year in November, and I went backpacking for like 3 days with some buddies up in the Ozark Mountains. And that was quite interesting too. Have you heard of the Ohio Howl?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, the classic audio that Matt Moneymaker captured, I want to say in 94. Yeah.
So the evening was setting and we'd set our tents up and we were standing by the river, and I heard something very similar to that. Like it sounded
really
a few miles off, like a loud siren-like yell.
Oh, wow.
The buddies I was with, they didn't seem to notice it. So I don't know if they were just like not hearing it or just didn't want to talk about it. But I made a note of it. So, and then that night was very interesting because at 2 a.m, I was woken up by a loud smash within like the camp area.
Really?
Like it sounded like a cannon going off. And we were right by the river, right below a massive cliff. But it was just one single smash. I mean, it woke me up, and my heart was in my throat, basically.
Wow.
So, and then about 2 hours later, there was something right in the camp, like super loud vocal, making a woo sound, like 3 different times.
Really?
Yeah, really loud. And so the next morning, some of the guys were like, "Did you hear that elk? Or did you hear that rock fall off the cliff?" I'm like, "Yeah, that wasn't a rock, because rocks, if a rock fell, it's going to make a sliding sound and, crumbling. It was one sound." So I think there was something weird going on that night in and around our camp.
Was that in Virginia as well?
No, that was in Arkansas, up in
Oh,
out in the middle of the Ozark Mountains. So, which if you blindfolded me and you set me in those Ozark Mountains, I couldn't tell you that I wasn't in Virginia. They almost look the same. Really big mountains, lots of hardwoods.
wow. Is it northern Arkansas or?
Yeah, because it was only a couple hours from Missouri, I
Okay.
believe. So yeah, I
Yep.
think it's northern Arkansas.
Wow. Yeah, there's some wild stuff that goes on down there, man.
I was shocked at the vocals. I'd never heard vocals like that, and then I heard a lot. So
Wow.
yeah,
The
Probably
crazy.
it didn't help that as we were hiking throughout the day, I would take my walking stick and pop it on a dead log as I was going along, just making noises.
Yeah, you may have been, calling them in. You're
I might
being
have
like,
called them
"Hey, let's
in,
hang
and
out."
my buddies had some experiences of their life that night, as well as me.
Man, you got to start you got to get a some kind of audio recorder with you, Travis, when you go out. I mean, if you're ever going to do anything like that, I would recommend, and you can pick one up for, relatively cheap, but you just have it just have it recording overnight, outside your campsite. And then it takes a few weeks to go through it, but you can capture some, and man, if you captured that stuff on audio, that'd be some really
it
cool
would have been so loud.
evidence. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great idea. I really should look into that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I don't know if you call it a hobby. It's just something, it's kind of stuff I've stumbled into, right? It's not, I wasn't really looking for all that. I just kind of stumbled into it.
When you went to the Ozarks, was it was just a camping trip? It wasn't specifically to look for, but it was just
a
bunch of dudes hanging out.
You're right. They mentioned Sasquatch, because dudes do that as they're hiking along. No, we were just doing it for fun. Just
wow,
just for
that's awesome
hiking trip, and we didn't stay at one place, every night. It was we were one place. We moved along. The sad thing for me was I really wanted to be out in the middle of nowhere. We spent two of those nights, two of the 3 nights at campsites, campgrounds, and we'd hike. This trail would go along the river, and we were camping at an actual campsite. But the night where I heard all the noises that in our camp, we were in the middle of nowhere. We weren't at a campsite. We were just along the river on the trail. So it's primitive. There was you weren't anywhere close to a camping area. So that's probably one reason why we might have been in someone else's living room, right?
Right.
So I guess they didn't want us to be too comfortable, stay too long, right? So yeah, those are just some of the encounters I've had. Nothing major really, but enough to have me curious.
But yet more major than some Bigfoot researchers that I know. That stuff you encountered, that's pretty substantial, man.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, totally. The one thing I learned going out with Tate is that in a normal expedition, nothing happens. So that stuff that you encountered, that's not normal, man. People don't usually get to experience waking up and the crazy whooping in the middle of your camp. That's wild stuff, dude.
Mm-hmm. There was one time I was on a canoe trip down one of our rivers here in Texas, and I got some audio during the night. I can't remember what time it was. It was probably around 2 or 3. It was, I would say it had to have been about a mile from us, but it sounded like a 1,000-pound coyote or something trying to mimic a coyote.
1,000-pound coyote.
Yeah, it was it was a dog sound, or as a coyote sound, making some sort. But it was a yip. It was a very, very deep voice, and then you could hear it echoing off the riverbanks. And so I held my phone up because it did it long enough. It woke me up, and I just held my an iPhone up in my tent, and I got some pretty good audio of it. And I even sent it to a research dude up in Oklahoma. I think his name's Troy Hudson. And he's like, yeah, that sounds like a squatch mimicking a coyote.
Wow.
So that was pretty. And a buddy I was with then, he's like, man, he said, you hear that last night? He's like, he even mentioned, he's like, that could have been a Bigfoot. Of course, we were out in the middle of the mountains out along this river too. Not a whole lot of people living around there. So it even sounded like towards the end of the recording, there might've been another one making the same noise.
Interesting.
Very deep. It was real scary sounding too. It was kind of haunting.
That would be interesting to listen to. What if you were to break Texas into, north, south, east, west, what part of Texas did that happen in?
North Texas. I'm in North Texas, but
okay.
There's a lot of rivers up in here. There's lots of Dallas, Fort Worth area.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of areas where there are, forests and regions where, and we're like, this area has a forest that actually connects. So if you get on a map, it connects to Oklahoma. It's called Cross Timbers Forest. So it's a really large forest that goes from Texas into Oklahoma, which at some point, I believe it would have to touch the eastern Texas forest of pine trees.
Sure.
And so if you think about it, there's plenty of areas for all these creatures to be hiding out. And
oh, yeah.
So, I'm in North Texas, but there's still lots of areas where I go hiking a lot. Living in the city, you want to get out.
Oh, sure.
So I get out as much as I can and just hike. So, but end up having experiences when I'm out hiking too. So, it kind of happens.
That's cool though. That for some reason or another, you're trying these experiences, these things to yourself. Have you ever run into or heard anything about? I've heard a lot of like Dogman or upright canine reports out of Texas. Have you ever heard anything like that?
I've heard of them in Texas, like East Texas. But I've never come across anything personally or seen any tracks. I've seen footprints, but they were more human-like, just really big human-like footprints.
Gotcha.
When I'm hiking, sometimes I'll step in one. I don't know if that makes sense. So like I'm hiking along and I'll step. I was like, whoa, that feels like a footprint. So I'll get back and I'll feel, and you can feel the big wide heel. And they're usually about 4 inches wide at the heel.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can kind of see where the front of it was. You're like, well, that's 11 inches or, 16 inches. But no, I've never seen a canine type. I have heard of that. And I honestly don't want to come across anything like that.
Yeah, me too. I've always thought that too. I'm like, if I'm fine with like seeing Bigfoot, that's fine. But for some reason, I would just not like to ever cross paths with some really angry looking Anubis type upright cane. Like that's just freaky stuff, man.
It really is. You probably seen, like, I've gone into, like, if you go to Lowe's or Home Depot during Halloween, a lot of times the last few years, they've had one like a Dogman type creature there.
Yeah, dude.
And the thing's 7 foot tall and he's hunched over. I'm like, what do these people know? Who's making this and what do they know? This looks too real. This sounds like, some people's encounters.
Yeah, someone's got the inside scoop here at Home Depot and they're not telling us what they know.
I know, they're just trying to scare us.
Oh, that's wild. The Virginia, I keep thinking back to the Virginia thing is so wild. So was that like is that like private property or is that like a state forest or a campground?
Yeah, well, no, it was more private property and private property that we had access to. So the owners allowed him to hike on it. My buddy. So my buddy lives in Virginia. So I would go out and visit him. So he had access, and so I was hiking with him. And so I had access to be there. I wasn't a resident. I would just enjoy. I'm kind of an outdoors guy anyway.
Right.
I like to hike around out in nature. So yeah, no, it's just the mountains out. It's in the kind of the Blue Ridge Mountains.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And out in Virginia there.
That's
pretty.
wild. That's
it's really
wild.
really pretty out there, and lots of places to for them to hide. I had no idea though. I really honestly had no idea I was going to run into anything like that. Wasn't even on my radar. I mean, I was researching giants for years. So, and historical accounts and giants and stuff like that. I wasn't looking for that, but I kind of stumbled over it.
That's just it's absolutely wild. And maybe there might be something to it where you've had all these things happen because you weren't necessarily looking, and you were just being like, a normal human, probably being loud, having a good time. And that's usually what brings in their curiosity. And they're like, hey, what are these dudes, doing? A lot of guys I know, they'll go out and they'll play musical instruments or, play video games or whatever. And, that the idea is to get the creature curious, and they come in, they check it out. And sometimes that works. But
that's a good idea.
Yeah. Travis, this has been a super fun chat. It's been very, very interesting. I feel like this is kind of enough that people listening to this could have a lot of questions, and they could really start looking into things for themselves. They could check out your Giants of Ancient America account, do the research for themselves, and get enough keywords to start looking, knowing what to look for on the internet for sure. And
right.
Yeah. Before we go, can you just one more time, if people are like, man, I want to like really get into, researching like Travis's, can you remind the listeners, like, what are the main ways that you're looking up these articles and that you recommend to do historical research?
Oh, okay. You're right. So just go to like a website of, say, Library of Congress or something like that. And it's real simple, really. You go to the website and you just type in keywords, maybe a giant or, skeleton or burial mound. I have figured out if you put in too many keywords, it's going to bring up 0.
Okay.
And so that's what makes the research hard, is you just have to do 1 or 2 keywords, and then you have to do lots of digging. But you can go there and you can see it for yourself by doing it that way.
That's wild.
Or you can just go to Giants of Ancient America. So it's Giants _ Ancient America on Instagram and Facebook. And you can go and just look at the articles that I've posted there. And maybe you'll find one that is from your state, and you can actually do research in your area.
There you go.
Look at. So I'm not real familiar with the areas that I'm posting about. But sometimes I'll have somebody message me, say, hey, that's like in my town, or that's in my county. And I'll say, well, that's awesome. So like, just go on those things and try to do some research in your area. Or if not, it just kind of, it lets you know what actually happened in the past in your area, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that is really cool. Is there a specific area in the U.S. where you wish you had connections to people that could actually like go and research it themselves as regards to these articles that come to mind? Or
yeah, I mean, I would say probably Ohio and Indiana and places, Michigan up there. I mean, that seemed to be a hotbed. I would love to just hang out with lots of people up there and have access to that area.
There you go. So listeners, if you're from those areas, you definitely, everyone needs to check this out, but especially people from those areas, you check out those accounts. And,
right. Yeah.
See what you got going on.
Yeah, check your own backyard.
Yeah, there you go. You never know what bones are in the backyard. So, Travis, before we go, and thanks again so much for hanging out tonight. Are there any other things that you want to make sure the listeners know about keeping up to date with what you're doing? Or is it primarily the Instagram and the Facebook account?
Yeah, that's it. That's where I document it all. It's just Instagram and Facebook. It seems to be the best way for me now. So that's where you find me, and that's where you find all the accounts. Not find me, find the accounts. So yeah, that's the place. Instagram and Facebook, Giants of Ancient America.
Fantastic. It's been a fun chat with you. Definitely talking about the ancient history that a lot of us probably didn't know about for America. Now, listeners, you've got some interesting things to look into. And we had a fun chat about a Bigfoot as well, which was a nice added addition. But thanks so much for hanging out tonight, Travis, and you have a good one, man. Thank you for listening to Bigfoot Society. If you like the show, please review and rate it 5 stars on iTunes. Hit the share button and send this episode to all your friends on social media. Subscribe to Bigfoot Society wherever you listen to podcasts. It doesn't cost a thing. Pick up a Bigfoot Society shirt or enamel pin over on our Etsy page, and people will tell you all about their Bigfoot sightings when you wear it. At least that's what people tell us. That's what happens. If you'd like to become an official member of Bigfoot Society with a membership card, a community of like-minded individuals, and extra content each month, then please consider becoming a supporter of the podcast by going to www.patreon.com/The Bigfoot Society. Thanks for listening.
Moms are amazing at tracking down hard-to-find items. Library books, socks, you name it. But sometimes help is welcomed. Care.com makes it easy to find babysitters near you. Sitters with the experience and skills your family needs, like after-school pickup and homework help. You just post a job for qualified sitters to apply. And since all Care.com caregivers are background checked, you can feel confident about interviewing and hiring. To get the child care help you need, sign up now at Care.com.